running. And hopefully this will be okay. I don't know why. Still not showing up. Maybe people are there, maybe they're not. Maybe it'll show up in a little bit. I should have this configured all correctly. So I'm not sure what's going on. Let me try to reload. Okay, I think we got it. Good. Just double checking to make sure it's going through. Yeah, it does appear to be. Okay, I can see myself. A little pixelated, a little. The audio is more important, right, than the actual video content. So hopefully it'll be okay for too much. So I apologize to everyone. There were some technical difficulties. Apparently, the UCF internet blocks live streaming complete. Result, different format. Basically, I'm streaming directly from my phone over my phone's internet connection rather than streaming through a Wi-Fi connection. So right now, this is going to appear probably a little blocky and a little blurry, but hopefully it will get better as the buffer and latency catch up. So welcome to week 6. So week 6 is the second part of unit 4, right? So this is really the part where we go through and we develop an entire model, and we really kind of go through how to build that model from the ground up. And hopefully you had a good chance to kind of start to get into that and kind of explore what's going on that. Now, most importantly, at the end of this week on Sunday night at midnight Pacific time, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time, you have your first assignment due, which is the model design questionnaire, right? And we've been talking about this last week and the week before a little bit, and hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it and just start to answer some of those, start to put together a document that reflects some of those questions, right? Now that assignment is turned in 11:50 Pacific Coast time, and or that is the equivalent of 2:59 on Monday on the East Coast, or the equivalent 8:59 a.m. on Monday in Central European time, right? Which is when those deadlines are. Hopefully, once you've turned that in, then from there, you're going to essentially be given another student's, well, 3 more students' design documents that you're then going to peer review, right? Get those in, you get the peer reviews, we go forward from there, right? Now, I had a couple of questions that have come up that I'm going to address, right? But before I get to them, I want to make sure that everyone knows you can always tweet at me at Bill Rand, and of course, you can also look at the. You can also post any questions you need to the YouTube chat as well as we're talking. I can see it up and running. Even though the video format and everything's a little weird today, it should be, I should still be able to answer your questions as you go along. And hopefully you can hear the audio even if the video is a little blocky at times. And again, for future reference, email those questions. You can also post them on the discussion forum. Chadka and I work together. Well, Chadka does most of the work, honestly. I just benefit from what he does, of picking out those questions and kind of identifying which ones we're going to go through each week, right? Okay. So I see a question has already come up. What is the there's already a question that's come up in the YouTube chat, and so I'll get to that shortly. I want to kind of go through some final announcements before I handle all that, right? Just to recap, right, your model design document is due by Sunday night at midnight Pacific time. The other comment I want to make is to go ahead and finish up Unit 4, and that Unit 5 should be posted. Actually, I think I'll be able to post it later today because I don't anticipate seeing any problems with that. But I will double check to see if there is. I'll double check to see if there's any small changes I want to make to Unit 5 before I post it. So let's go ahead and start to answer the question. So the first question that we had from lost for a second there on what you want. I would highly recommend going to the forum first. People tend to be very helpful on the forum, right? And I think that's a good solution. If it is a question, though, that you think may have been answered in the past, it's always worth checking Stack Overflow first. Yeah, so maybe I'll revise that. Maybe the best way to do it is first check Stack Overflow, see if the question's been asked in the past, right? And see if there's an answer there. If there isn't one, then I would post the question to the forum first. If you think it's a question that might be of general interest to NetLogo users and not just people in this course, then definitely post it to Stack Overflow as well, right? It'd be interesting to see if you get different answers in both. I think both are very good ways. I know for a fact, the forum is basically being monitored by other classmates in the class, right? Stack Overflow is monitored by other NetLogo modelers and developers, right? And so it's kind of a different population you're getting access to. However, I do know that the NetLogo developers do spend quite a bit of time looking at the Stack Overflow questions that are tagged NetLogo, and so you might get an answer directly from a developer. Thank you very much for that question. I can't quite see. The interface is still weird. So, from Albert. So, thanks, Alan. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Other questions that have come up. So, Model 7. So, there were a couple of questions that came up in the forum about a code error syntax problem in Unit 4, right? And this is essentially the same one I talked about. So I'm going to refer people to go back and look at the Office Hours from week 5 if you want in-depth discussion, especially because right now the only way I could show you code is to actually videotape it from my phone, which would be a little weird and difficult to do. But if you go back and look at week 5, I definitely go through an example of of the problems that were in Model 6 and Model 7. So essentially what this comes down to is that Model 6 and Model 7 in Unit 4, they deal with this use of the preferential attachment function, right? And in the original preferential attachment code that was written for NetLogo, there was no minimum degree parameter, right? Instead, it was just assumed that the minimum degree was always 1. They've now added a parameter that does this, and we've updated the code on AWS so that if you download the model files that are attached to the videos for Unit 6, for Model 6 and Model 7, you will get the correct code now that actually works. However, the videos have yet to be updated. I plan to, unfortunately, just with the beginning of school and all, it's been a little, I've been a little backed up, but I plan to update the video files themselves as well to contain a little note that talks about what that talks about the changes to that particular model code. So again, I would highly recommend that if you're interested in trying to get Model 6 and Model 7 to work correctly, or if you want to know why they had to be changed, check out last week's Office Hours. So Lisa has a question. Is there something or someplace we should be looking at regarding running NetLogo through R? There seems to be several ways to do this, and none of them is super intuitive. Well, I apologize for that. Yeah, that is the case. NetLogo itself is extraordinarily well documented. Unfortunately, some of the extensions that have been built for NetLogo aren't as well documented, right? There is a R NetLogo, which I'm sure you've discovered, extension, right? And it's available up on, if you just type in R NetLogo into Google, right, you'll get a bunch of references to an R NetLogo extension. Those tend to be the best. There is, that tends to be the one I am most familiar with. There is actually some video tutorials, not done by me, but done by other people. So I know of at least one that's about a half an hour long that basically goes through how to use the R NetLogo package. I think that's probably the best way to kind of start to get an understanding of how to use R through NetLogo through R. I actually don't run NetLogo through R myself, right? I actually run NetLogo separately. I export the data I need from it and then use that data in R. And the reason why is because, quite frankly, I like to keep pieces of code that do the best at certain things separate from each other, right? So NetLogo is really good at building models, running models, generating the output, right? R is really good at processing that data, right? I don't see much of it, and this is just me. This is just me, but I don't see much of a need to have those all integrate into one platform. I actually run them separately from each other, right? Now, if there's certain functionality you need, certain statistical packages you need, I could see how you might want to integrate them, right? But if I really want to do that, I would probably actually write an extension for NetLogo that called those files, right? But again, to answer Lisa's original question, if you actually are interested in running NetLogo through R, I think the best package out there that I've seen is the one called ArtNet, and there is a tutorial of how to use that online on YouTube. So I recommend it's run by James Curley. So I'd recommend checking that one out. Okay. So the next question that I have listed here is that there's been some questions about using other, this is kind of related, about using other statistical software other than R, right? So this is from IPEC, who basically says that they use tools such as SAS, Data, and Jump. Would I be able to do a short video on analysis with other than R? For the sake of this course, do I need to learn R? You don't need to learn R. I could see about creating a small video. Honestly, I don't use SAS Data. I've used Jump a little. I mean, I've used all of these to a little bit, right? But by the time I started doing statistical processing, right, of a lot of data, R was already quite well developed. This is like around 2008 that I really started jumping into like empirically analyzing data to a large extent. At that point, R was already pretty developed, and I just learned that, right? So I don't know SAS Data and Jump as well, but NetLogo is essentially outputting a CSV file, right? All statistical packages out there can read in a CSV file and analyze it however they would do it, right? In the textbook, we actually go through a demonstration of how to do the same analysis in Excel, right, that I do using R in this class. I find R to be easier than Excel for sure, because Excel doesn't have this notion. You can't easily aggregate across multiple runs and things like that in Excel as you can in R. But so I find that a better way to do it. But I can look into maybe doing one like Jump is fairly easy to use. SAS Data, I mean, they're all going to be pretty much the same, right? Like you're reading in a bunch of data. You're putting that data into a data frame of some sort, and then you're analyzing that data appropriately. There's going to be some small differences, but it's going to be similar to each other. Okay. Let's see. So the next question I have coming up here is that Aaron asks, can the model for the assignment be an extension, modification of an existing model if we highlight in the assignment which bits of it we borrowed from the existing model? Yeah. So honestly, yeah, that's fine. Like, I don't want you to submit literally a model library model with like one line change of code. So I want you to kind of commit to doing your own model, right? But if you need to borrow parts of code from models, that's what modeling is about. That's what computer science is about to a large extent, right? Is using what other people have already built before you and then modifying and using it to the advantages that you need to do within your particular project, right? So I have no problem with that. It would be helpful in your documentation tab, explain what parts you did yourself and what parts were originally drawn. And we have had, we've had incidents in the past in this course where students have turned in essentially a models library model, and I don't want to see that. And so we actually, I think in the final syllabus questionnaire, we do ask people to look to see if this model is too similar to other models that have already existed. But as long as you're being honest about it and it came from the other models, I don't see any problems with that. So Renan has this question: is the Google form questionnaire that you did back at the end of Unit 1 different than the Unit 4 assignment? The answer is yeah. You do need to submit it. So there's kind of two questions here. Is it the same thing, and do you need to submit it again? Yes, you do need to submit it again, and no, they're not quite the same thing, right? The Unit 1 assignment was more kind of a general, like, let's start to think about this. Let's get you in that process. Now, I think using the Unit 1 answers that you generated to develop your Unit 4 document is probably going to be very helpful, right? If you have those things still around, I would highly recommend, kind of continuing to use them, right? But they are essentially, it is a different assignment, and so you need to turn something else in. And unfortunately, there's no good way to give people access directly to the Google form questionnaires, so we need this document, like a PDF file that you upload to Complexity Explorer so that we can have people evaluate each other's assignments, okay? Let's see, next question. What is the deadline for the model submission? So someone is getting eager and wants to work on the model for the final part of the class. We haven't announced that yet, honestly, but I will tell you, it's usually 2 weeks before the end of the class. Let me see if I can pull it up. I think I put together the dates, but these dates may change, so it depends upon, like, if we run into any more. Occasionally we run into some technical difficulties with the class or stuff like that, right? But as of right now, let's see, where do I have it? I think it's in Unit 6. Yep. So as of right now, this moment, August 16th at 11:30 a.m. on the East Coast, I have the deadline down as September 10th. At midnight on the West Coast, right? So that's what I currently have it down as. We will, as we're going along with the class, I think that matches well with the overall course goals. Let me see. 10th, September 24th. Yeah, that gives us kind of, so the course is supposed to end on October 1st. So we may be able to push that deadline back by 1 week at most, right? So it's either going to be September 10th or September 17th, right? But right now, I think the goal is to have it turned in by September 10th. So it's about a month away from now, which is about what I normally like to see. I like to see all the assignments, so yeah, given that there's a good chance it'll be pushed back to September 17th now I think through it. But right now the deadline in a Complexity Explorer is set at September 10th, but it'll probably be pushed back by 1 week, okay? That hasn't been published anywhere. It'll be published as soon as Unit 6 goes live, okay? So there have been some issues with using our NetLogo in RStudio, so this is a question that came up. So Lisa, actually, who's viewing right now, and Vadim were talking back and forth. Had some questions about this, right? And it appears that there might be some problems running our NetLogo in RStudio, and quite frankly, I don't support our NetLogo myself. Like, that's not a package that I built, or that was in fact actually built as part of the NetLogo group, right? That was actually built by an external developer named Theo. And so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I think the best solution would be to actually reach out to the original developer, right? If we can't figure it out ourselves. I know that Chadika also has some experiences working with external software packages and their integration with NetLogo, so he may be able to provide some help and assistance as well. That's my general thought on the matter, right? So unfortunately, I don't know if there's much else I can do to help you out with that right now. I think that this is so. I see that Lisa has been working through the NetLogo users manual to get this up and running. I don't think that's going to be very helpful to you. I think that you're going to need to reach out to Jan, who developed the original ArtNet logo package, in order to actually get this up and running. Okay, so I'd recommend looking there instead. Okay. So there's also been a little discussion in the forums about using Python instead of R, and some people have some suggestions. And there are a number of packages that were written to allow you to better integrate Python and NetLogo. So there's one called PyNetLogo that has been developed before, and then actually Chatika, who's the teaching assistant for this class, he actually developed his own version in a project that we have going on here at University of Central Florida called PyNetLogo, right? And so PyNetLogo is his own package, and in fact, he just published a paper on it. I know that because I got a Google alert indicating that he had published that paper recently, just this morning, in fact, because it cited one of my papers, or probably my textbook actually. And so there's a number of different options that will allow you to integrate NetLogo. Sorry, from the phone, right? Is that I think I'm streaming again. So apologies for that. Looks like I am. Good. Okay. So we'll go forward through here. Anyways, what I would is that Chatika has just put together a new package that he calls PyNet that's available that should do a pretty good job of also helping you integrate NetLogo with Python. Essentially, this is if you don't want to work. The original poster, at least on the forum, was talking about this as a replacement for R, but honestly, you can do a bunch of things with Python and NetLogo together, and PyNetLogo in interesting ways. And in fact, Chatika's is NL for Pi. I apologize, I said it wrong. It's not PyNetLogo. PyNetLogo is the other one. So NL for Pi, which is Chatika's one, provides you with the capability to interact with NetLogo through Pi. And Chatika built that primarily, actually, not for doing analysis of NetLogo models, but actually for allowing you to do kind of calibration and exploration and sensitivity analysis of the models, right? So that's there are many different uses where you can combine Python and NetLogo in interesting ways. Okay, so another question came through while I was chatting and while I get disconnected briefly there. Alan Albert asked the odd framework, ODD, overall design and details, does not seem to be mentioned in the course or in your book. Do you have a comment about it useful to detail? I think it actually is mentioned in the book. I would be surprised if it didn't get mentioned. I very much apologize if it didn't get mentioned. It should be, for sure. I know Graham and Railsback's work is featured in our book for sure. And I thought and you know what? I think of course, it's not like we haven't talked about it yet, but we will talk about it in the near future. I find the odd framework very, very useful for communicating a model to in the context of to someone who wants to reproduce your model, right? Like if I want to write down the overall description of what the goals of the model is and how it's going to be going about doing it, it's a pretty good way. And actually, reproduce is not the right word here. It's a very good document if I want to communicate the conceptual model that I'm building to someone else. There are ways you can interpret the odd framework that wind up being too detailed at times, right? Where you're talking about like emergence and adaptation in ways that you might not need to for a particular model. There are also ways of interpreting the odd framework that will result in you not producing enough details for what to reproduce a model necessarily. And that's why we came up with those 7 questions, right, that we talk about in the course and we talk about in the book, right, that deal with like, what are your agents? What are their properties? What is the environment? What does a time step look like, right? And that's kind of what the details section of the odd framework is. And we find that if you're just interested in reproducing, that's the most useful part to get through there. But for those of you who don't know, the ODD framework, or the odd framework, was developed by Volker Grimm and Steve Railsback, and essentially it was models so that so paper that describes your model, right, there's an easy way to pass along the details. And I find it useful. I do find it, it's because I find it's best used as an appendix to a paper, right, where it provides additional detail that might not be in the paper. But I think that what needs to be in a paper is somewhat different than what's in the odd, right? It's these 7 questions, right? Like, what are the agents? What are they doing, right? Like, the paper alone should contain, I don't know if I want to say exactly enough detail, but a good approximation of the detail necessary to replicate the paper, right? And replicate the model. I don't want to say all of it, because you get into these cases where, like, you have an agent-based model that's accessing an integrated assessment, a climate change model, right, and things like that. And in which case, I don't think you need all that detail in the paper, but I need a good high-level description, at least, to where I could have a good idea of how I'm going to replicate your model. And the biggest problem I find with a lot of agent-based modeling papers out there is that there's some key point that I'm curious about that is not answered by the description, right? And the odd protocol is one way to potentially do that, but if you just like literally follow the odd framework, right, and just answer the questions as described, you can write a description of your model that is not replicable. And so it's not like the odd framework solves that problem necessarily. It just provides a good way to think about how to fill out those details. Okay. So let's see, the next question that has come up is, so this is actually related to a question we talked about before. Can you submit for your model a model that you've been working on for another class, or that you want to extend? And I find this very similar to just taking like a model library model and extending it. It's fine, but I want you to explain clearly how this model that you're doing for this particular class is different than models you've done in other classes, right? So if you've built, say, a diffusion of information model for a class that you've been taking, right, and you're like, I want to take that model and I want to change it slightly and submit it, that's fine. I just want to make sure that you're documenting how you changed it, right? So go ahead and make sure that as long as you do that, I think it's fine. Here's an interesting suggestion. I'd love to hear some feedback on this. So if you have a chance and want to shoot us an email, tweet at us about it. Erica sent an email so Erica has the problem that at her university, there aren't many people who are doing agent-based modeling, right? And so there's no one to really give her feedback on what she wants to do. And so she suggested what she's calling a doctoral seminar. I think of seminars as a more internal thing, so I would call it maybe a workshop, right, where students could present and get feedback from other students on their modeling work, right? I think that's a fantastic idea. I would love to do it. Maybe I'll talk to some friends of mine about potentially setting up something like that, right, where we could have an ABM doctoral meeting that was focused primarily on doctoral students who are interested in presenting and getting feedback on their agent-based modeling work. It's a really good idea. It's going to take a while to execute, so it may not happen in time to help you, Erica. But hopefully we could potentially get something like that. That being said, I should mention there are a number of different opportunities that you have to kind of go out and present your work, right? So there is the Computational Social Science Society of America's upcoming meeting, for instance, right, where they're going to, and unfortunately, I think the deadline is passed to submit to it, but that's a great place to go and present some work. SwarmFest is still happening occasionally. It's another great place to go and present agent-based modeling work. There are some great. There is a workshop I go to every summer in Munster and present some talks, and it's kind of open. You could submit things, and you could get some feedback on what you're doing. And a lot of the people presenting at that meeting in particular are doctoral students, right? So it's a fantastic place to get some feedback. So one of the places I highly recommend if you're interested in this and you want to kind of keep up the speed on where can I present, go to openabm.com. I think it's .com, right? Openabm.com. And if you go there, they actually have a calendar. So if I think you may have to become. Why am I not seeing the calendar? That's interesting. Maybe it's under the forum. Huh. Events. Oh, it's under events. So there's a big button at the top that says events. And the events button will show you all the meetings that are happening that are ABM related. And this is not just meetings happening at ComSeason and Open ABM. This is meetings happening all over the world. So for instance, right now, there's the Dresden short course on agent-based modeling is finishing up. That's the one. I think that's the one. Is that the one Volker teaches at? Could be. But anyways, so go there. I highly recommend taking it. Steve and Volker teach that one, right? That one I had, take a look at. Actually, Volker's not listed on this particular one. It's Uta Berger, Jürgen Gronwald, Robert Schlicht, and Steve Brailsback, right? So that's, that one's going on right now. There's a social simulation conference coming up, right? That's hosted by ESSA, the European Social Simulation Association. So I definitely recommend going to the events page there. They will also list deadlines, right? So GeoSim, which is a workshop focused around simulation of geographic phenomenon, right? That deadline is coming up on whatever date I'm looking at this is at, August 20th, right? There's a PhD colloquium, a doctoral colloquium at the Social Sim Conference at ESSA, in the European Social Seminar Association, happening in 2018. But I do like the idea, and maybe that one is fine, but I do like the idea of having something that's independent of all these that would be a doctoral symposium. And so it's a great idea, and I'll definitely talk to some colleagues and see if we can get something moving along those lines. So there were also some questions about getting extensions for the deadlines for the assignments. Unfortunately, because of the way this course works, we just can't give extensions, right? If you want, if something happens and you just miss that deadline completely, shoot us an email. We'll see what we can do. But because essentially, as soon as you turn in your assignment, it gets peer reviewed by other people, right? There's no way for us to easily work you into that peer review process if you miss that deadline, right? So if there is no possible way around it, then, send it whenever you can, and we'll see what we can do. But I can't promise anything if you miss the deadline, right? I can't promise that you'll get any feedback at all if you miss the deadline. And that's just because, with 1,100 students taking the class, there's just no easy way for us to integrate missed deadline turn-ins into the overall course, right? And Mo was specifically saying that they want some feedback from their own advisors before they submit. I understand, but these are two independent processes to some extent. Send it, get it submitted, right? And then you can always ask for your advisors' comments at the same time, right? So don't worry about doing one then the other would be my advice. Go ahead and make the deadline at this point, right? And relate to that, Kurt, who's traveling right now, was asking if he can access the course materials after the 1st of October since he missed the first weeks of the course. Yes, of course. All the materials are freely available online after the course ends. The benefit you get from being in the course right now, right, is you get this live office hours interactions, right, but you also get the feedback from the peer reviews and other things along those lines. But if you want to just look at the materials, those materials will be available for free in perpetuity after the end of the course. Okay. So I think that's all the questions I've got today. I'm going to flip through the YouTube chats and the Twitter feeds and see if there's anything else that's come in. But I don't think there is. Yep, as far as I can tell. So with that being said, just a quick reminder, right? So on Sunday, you have your design documents that are due, right? So make sure and get those in before midnight West Coast time on Sunday. Be looking forward to coming back to getting getting your peer review. So you have to go in and evaluate some ones that other ones have been putting. You have to evaluate design documents that other people have put together, right? And then of course you're also going to be finishing up your the unit 4, right? And unit 5 will be going live shortly, and you'll be and then start working on your final model, right? Because that's going to be due in about a month. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're working forward. Okay. Now, thanks everyone for being here again, and sorry for the weird format for this particular office hours. I should have checked it out ahead of time. I assumed that since I had good internet access, it would be fine, but apparently they blocked the YouTube stream in particular, so that was the problem. But this seems to have worked at least somewhat. And next week we'll be back to basically our regularly scheduled program. Again, I have to travel, and so I won't be doing it directly from my office, but I'll be at a place that does not block YouTube streaming. So I will double check that ahead of time this time. So anyways, thanks everybody, and see y'all next week. Take care. Bye.